Hello and welcome to another episode of Stages for Ages, the podcast for parents, providing you with helpful information, useful tips, and a little bit of guidance, and giving you a parenting village for everyone out there that needs a little bit of support. So today I'm talking with Shafer Stedron. Shafer is a doctor, but she is a parent as well, more importantly. And she has got a lot of advice about parenting, and also she homeschools her children. So we're going to have a little bit of a chat about that. So lovely to see you, Shafer. Sorry, I'm getting my words muddled up. Lovely to have you on the show. Thank you for coming on. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thank you so much, Lucy, for having me. I'm so excited to be here and have this discussion with you. It's always a pleasure to talk with you.
It's a pleasure to have you back on. So, yeah, do you want to tell us a little bit about you, Shafer, just to kind of give everyone a bit of a background about you and what you do, and yeah, maybe mention a little bit about how you started homeschooling and why you decided to do that with your children.
Sure. Well, I'm a neurologist. I actually am a neurologist for adults. I'm also a life coach, musician. I'm an author, and I'm also a publisher of children's literature. So, children's related storytelling and growth is very near and dear to my heart and to our family as we have created this publishing house, Little House of Dreams. Really, when we started homeschooling, that was an effect of COVID, right? So
Yeah,
many of us started this homeschooling journey, not because we decided to intentionally, but because all of a sudden schools were closed,
yeah,
right? So I was a physician. I just had a tiny baby. My son was less than a year old. I really didn't intend to homeschool my daughter, but it was a gift of those challenges, just like life usually gives us gifts wrapped
yeah.
in challenges, that I had this opportunity to homeschool the kids and be there with them and really take a larger part in their educational journey. And it was really amazing. I'm so, as much as that was such a difficult time for all of us, I'm so grateful for having that time with the kids, and especially with my oldest, who was just finishing up kindergarten at the time, to then help her then through first and second grade as not only her mother but as her teacher was really an amazing experience.
Yeah, I think I think there are a lot of parents out there, as you say, that decided and have gone forward and actually pushed forward with homeschooling since COVID as a result of it. I know certainly the UK anyway, we're having quite a big shift in education at the moment,
Mm.
with regards to parents feeling a little bit let down by the schooling system in the UK, and they're
Mm.
kind of focusing now on moving their children into home education. I believe there is a difference in the UK. I don't know about the US and other countries that we say home education in the UK as opposed to homeschooling. So home education would be the parents deciding what they're teaching their children, in terms of they
Mm.
don't follow a set curriculum, they don't do, a certain recommended amount of hours. They will, go with their children and decide, right, well, my child is really good at arts and crafts. We're going to focus on that. My child is very, very good at numbers. We're going to focus on that and do it that way. Whereas homeschooling, as far as I believe, is they bring in maybe a private tutor that will do sort of online lessons, or they will get a curriculum essentially the same as a school would, and they will follow a curriculum in that way. But it's just done via home rather than in a school. I don't know if that's the same where you are, but just wanted to kind of
Yeah.
draw a line on that. So if I say home education, so I'm still
Yes.
talking about the same thing, but it's yeah, we sort of call it home education in the UK.
Yeah, there are some guidelines, and it depends on your state and your region in the US about what you'll need to do and what you'll need to report. Where I am, there are just some guidelines, the subjects that need to happen. that they need to have so that, when they do rematriculate into a more formal education in the school system, that they won't be behind their peers. So I think it is really helpful to have that metric, but it really allows you to kind of, as you were talking about when you're describing home education, focus your time. Depending upon your child's age, they may only need 15 minutes of math a day. So if they don't love math, making them sit there for an hour or two may actually be destructive to their love of math and education if they're not in a neurodevelopmental stage where they can really embrace that yet,
Yeah,
right? And you may need to actually work with them more, pardon me, on things that are really things that are in alignment with the things that they're interested in, and then sneak the math in, because you, as their homeschooling or home educating parent, have the opportunity to know your child and to know, how can I sneak this math in? Can I make it a verbal math problem instead of we're just sitting down with 2 times 10, right? Can I make it not about memorization and about just writing it out, but more about a story? Because most people learn better with stories.
exactly. Yeah, I think that's one of the what you said then is getting your child and learning about what your child and how they learn best. And I think that is one of the main problems that we have in the UK with the schooling system, is that everyone is taught exactly the same, and not everyone learns exactly the same. And there are, when you're in a classroom situation, in a classroom environment, children are being taught to do math, for example, because it is one of the more typically harder subjects that a lot of children struggle with. But math in particular, you're taught you've got a textbook and you have to do your answers and you're working out and all of this, and that's the only way to learn math apparently in school. Whereas, there are so many interactions in life where that can be taught. If you take a 4-year-old to the shop, you can give them a £5 note and say to them, you give the lady the £5 note and the lady will give you the money back. That's math. The
Yeah.
older they get, you can take them out, you can take them into different scenarios, and there are so many ways of involving them without getting them to sit there and writing, math questions out and math problems. And I think it's real life applications that are going to get through to
Mm.
children rather than a textbook. So I think there's
Yeah.
a lot to be said for home education and homeschooling. But how did you kind of manage working as a parent and homeschooling? How did you kind of fit that in with your job, which is obviously quite an in-depth job?
Well, at that time with COVID, I was working from home. And so that was really, really helpful. But, I was working a lot at the time. So I would just, work kind of odd hours and make it work. And also, because the children, they only need so much time, you could structure it. So, okay, we do a certain percentage of our studies in the morning, and then in the afternoon, we have a play date. Or one thing we did often, because I live in the northern part of the States, I'm on the ski patrol. We have a lovely collection of mountains nearby that kids can ski at. That's one safe activity that we were able to do during, the COVID times, that we were allowed to go and ski. And that was my daughter's sport during that time.
Yeah.
So we were able to get out and kind of balance, something we love to do as a family with also making it a school activity, her school sport. And honestly, that's, I think, getting back to the idea of getting to know your child and understanding who they are and really connecting with them. The greatest gift we can give our children is our time and our attention. And if we do that in a quality way and not worry so much about the quantity, not shame ourselves for, well, I need to work, I need to have this time away. My child may need to be in daycare during this time, or my child may need to be in these after school activities so that I can have this time blocked for work or for myself, for the home, whatever it is. Trying to just let go of that feeling of shame, of, worrying about balance. There's really no balance, right? At any given moment, our balance is in one direction and then it's going to go in the other direction. Balance is not a static state. And there are times when work may need us, our children always need us more than anything, but it's okay to show our children our strength and our commitment to other things so that they can learn how they can commit themselves in the world. So I just want to impart upon people, if you're homeschooling, if you're not home educating and your children are, in aftercare and they're in school, try to focus on what you can control, which is how you're showing up in the time that you do have with your children. And that will make a world of a difference.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you. And when you obviously, I know yours was kind of as a factor of COVID. So obviously, I'm assuming the school essentially would have been part of your kind of journey. Essentially, prior to you homeschooling, they would have said, "Right, we're shutting the school. This is some homework
Exactly.
or whatever for you to do." When you were doing it, did you have a set kind of schedule or a routine for how you found that worked for you, and how did you kind of work that into your sort of day? What would have been your
Yeah.
schedule for your daughter?
Yeah, so we would generally try to focus on the morning. I try to let her sleep in because I'm a big advocate for allowing children to get adequate sleep. And that is one problem with how we structure traditional school settings is it doesn't necessarily allow children to get an adequate amount of sleep.
Yeah,
So being able to allow the kids to sleep in and wake up when they're able to, that was one amazing thing about homeschooling, about home educating. So definitely making sure that our schedule accommodated sleep and rest, a healthy breakfast. One thing that, because my daughter was at that age, and I think your son is maybe not quite at that age, but there's this time between 4 and 6 or 7 when they are voraciously hungry. They need to snack. They're growing, just gangbusters, and they just need to snack and drink water and juice and everything constantly. So, we would actually sit often around the kitchen island so that I could actually be chopping up vegetables and we could have, our pamphlets and our coloring and our projects, our science experiments, and all the things that we needed to do that day. We'd have a stack. So that way we could say, okay, how much energy do we have? It's the morning, so we have high energy. Let's do math and get it out of the way.
yeah,
Or, you know what, we're kind of in a bad mood. Let's do the thing that's going to help elevate our mood. So it was really nice to be able to balance the realities of the day and adjust the curriculum to those rather than making my daughter, because really my son was too little for homeschool at that time, but making her react and adjust to the realities of the curriculum.
yeah, yeah. I think what you just said then as well, and that's another thing that a lot of people forget, is that there are so many opportunities to educate someone and teach them. When you said about the cooking,
Yeah.
yes, okay, you're teaching them cooking, but there's so many other things that they can be taught. That, like, if they're young, you can teach them while you're chopping up vegetables. You can teach them about the vegetables. You can teach them the colours of the vegetables, the nutritional value of the vegetables. But you can also incorporate things like science. So, when the water
Yes.
is boiling, what temperature does the water come to when it's boiling, or what happens if we put this vegetable in here and it goes sloppy, when it's cooked, what's that called? There's so many different elements of teaching someone and showing them how to be educated, essentially. And I think cooking is a brilliant way, and it's a great way to bond as a family whilst you're teaching them something as well. So I think that's brilliant. Um, and
And to sneak in that math, by the way, sneak in that
exactly, yeah,
math. Like, here's a quarter cup of flour, here's a half cup of sugar. What does
measuring,
that mean? And
yeah,
we only need a little bit of baking powder because baking powder as a substance has a bigger impact than
yeah,
all this flour does on what's going to chemically happen. So you're exactly right. I mean, there's so much science in cooking.
yeah,
One thing that we looked at was this brilliant book by Samin Nosrat, I think is that her name, a beautiful chef and just an amazing creative person. And she wrote a book. I don't want to say it wrong. I think it's Fat, Acid, Heat, and Fat, acid, heat, and one more thing. And it was just kind of the science behind cooking. And it was such a beautiful book. And she had a 4-part series on Netflix. And so we
Okay.
were able to watch the episodes and learn about it and really kind of bring in that science of cooking. So that's one of the tools we used, because when you're homeschooling, you just get to use any tool. And it's
Yeah.
really fun and beautiful.
Yeah, when you think about it, actually, the cooking is actually probably, there's so many elements with cooking. Like you say, there's math, there's science, there's, just general kind of colors and numbers and shapes and textures, for younger children. But yeah, you've got your weights, your densities. There's so many things that you can do with cooking. So yeah, cooking is a really good one, actually. I didn't really think about that. So yes, for anyone out there that's looking at home education, cooking is a great thing to incorporate within it. And did you go to any sort of, I don't know if it's in the US where you are, but obviously in the UK, we've got things like homeschool groups where people can go off and meet. Obviously, I know with COVID being a factor in your
Yeah.
homeschooling journey, you probably won't have had that option. But was that an option to you, or do you know of any groups that you could have gone to if COVID wasn't
Yeah.
in play?
So I live in a pretty small community, so we don't necessarily have the things that a larger community would have, but they do exist. So absolutely, if you're homeschooling, please reach out and form these bonds. Your children will form connections with these families that will most likely carry them through, just like when you were in traditional school, if you were. So some of those people you met in first, second, third grade, those are people that you're connected with your whole life. So that's a beautiful thing. You don't have to feel isolated because you're home educating or homeschooling. It's not necessarily that you have to have one with the other, right? But for me, our big community was actually the ski community, because again, it was COVID. You weren't allowed to gather in groups. You weren't allowed to gather inside, but we could be outside safely distanced from one another. And my daughter formed just beautiful relationships with her coach and with her teammates. And it was so lovely that she was able to continue on with those connections despite the challenges of COVID.
Yeah. So I think it's one of the big kind of concerns or major sort of stopping points that a lot of parents have. Obviously, one of the main things is, they've got jobs, they work, they're not sure how they can kind of balance home educating, homeschooling with their jobs. But I think another factor that kind of puts a lot of parents off is that they're worried that their children aren't going to get that social aspect. But I think, we forget that children are, probably a lot more social than adults. Children don't really care who they talk to. They will go and talk to everyone and anyone. If you look at any child in the park, they will just go up to someone and just go and play with them and talk to them, and they make friends very, very easily.
They
Um,
do.
and they don't necessarily make those connections when they're at school. It is when they are, at soft play areas, if they're little, they make them when they're at the park with, random children on the play areas. When they're older, they go out, they start forming their own friendship groups. And again, that's not necessarily at school. So children have a very, very big capability to make friends and be social without being in a
Yeah.
school environment. And I think parents are kind of wrongly kind of put off homeschooling because they're worried about the social aspect of it.
And it makes me think about how, for my children, some of the most precious moments and some of the most amazing connections they've made is when I include them in what would be maybe traditionally thought of as my time,
Yeah,
and I take them with me and they connect with safe adults
yeah,
or their children or their activities. If they happen to need to come with me to an event because I can't find a babysitter, and they come with me to the event and they're chatting with an adult, that can actually be a beautiful opportunity for them to learn about that adult, learn about their journey, learn something new that I can't share because that's not my journey. And I would say that, homeschooling or not homeschooling, include your kids in safe ways when you can in your lives so that they can really see. Because I think that is one of the gifts of homeschooling That's the gift of including them in your lives, no matter what the structure of that looks like, because that's something I think we've kind of become a bit disentangled from one another's lives. It's like, okay, you go to school and you have your aftercare. I have my adult activities during the day and during the evening, and we often live these parallel lives. And when we think back to how life used to be, where your children got to see you work, they got
Yeah.
to go with you to work. They got to see those skills. They got to see you react and respond to challenges. They had the opportunity to see you grow. And that they could then mirror, because neurologically speaking, it's a biological imperative that we mirror other people. And so school is wonderful. It's wonderful for children to be with their peers. They also need an opportunity to see adults adulting. They need to see adults working, succeeding, having challenges and overcoming them in a calm and responsible manner, because then they will mirror that behavior. So we really need to take these opportunities to include our kids, whether it's in homeschooling, home education, or just in safe activities, so they can not only mirror in a peer sense at school or in play dates, play groups, but also get the opportunity to mirror behavior in adults, because we can tell them what to do all we want, but they're more likely to learn from what they see us
Yeah,
doing.
definitely. Yeah. So what's that saying? Is like monkey see, monkey do, isn't it? It's yeah,
Yeah. We
they
mirror. Yeah.
respond so much better to seeing adults doing, it's the same with any sort of situation with children. If you've got a child that's brought up in a household that's, argumentative, and they're causing arguments all the time in their family, and that's generally going to kind of impact on the child in a negative way, because that's all they know, that's all they see. If they're brought up in a more positive environment, they generally tend to follow that positivity, and they excel and they do better. So yeah, I think, like you say, get the children out there with you, and let them see what parents do as well. With regards to, I know your daughter, she obviously, and I did want to ask about that with the book that she wrote, because did she start that in home, like when she was being home educated? Was that afterwards, or was that, where did the
Yeah.
daughter write a
Let me
book,
grab it.
didn't she?
I always have them like within reach, just because I'm so proud of them. So yeah, my daughter, and that's her. That's my sweet girl. That's when she was 8. And homeschooling, right? So we're out on the playground because you need to wiggle and get the giggles out very regularly. So she was 8, and in 2nd grade when she wrote this book, and I was her typist and her editor. I find that for her creative process, when she can just speak the story, it just comes out in just this beautiful natural way. She's a natural storyteller. So I was able to type that up for her, edit it for her, and then we just had it independently published. We actually asked our local bookstore, oh, could you just put a few books up on the shelves? And they said, okay, yeah, we'll buy 6, sure, just so that her friends and family can come in and buy it, and she can say, oh, my book was in a bookstore. But what happened was, every week I was hearing back from the bookstore, and they were saying, could you bring us more? Could you bring us double? Because we've sold out of them. And it was so incredible. And she learned from this. We had had a really challenging time in our home life as well. At this point in time, I was going through a divorce. And not only was this a project that she was able to do during homeschooling, this was what her 8th year was. This was the experience of that year, that's the year she published a book. And she loved it so much that then she's like, well, okay, we obviously need to write another book. So she wrote Foxtail. And so this one came out when she was 9. Foxtails 2. You can see she's a little older there. So that one came out when she was 9, and then now this year at the age of 10, she's having Wolf Tales come out, her 3rd book, and she's also working with our local humane society to write a 4th book, which is called Shelter Dogs, to try to bring more attention to the plight of animals in shelters, to encourage people to adopt and donate and help them. So what happened was, through this homeschooling opportunity for her to share her voice, for her to learn the impact of her words, of simple words, right? Because I think as women, as children, as people, we often think they're just my words. It's just little old me. Who's going to really benefit from hearing this? And what she learned was a lot of people. If I am very meaningful about what I put out into the world, and I share it with people, and I encourage them to not only read what I have created, but to share their stories. That is so impactful. And so, as a result of her not only publishing her books, we started a children's publishing company, Little House of Dreams Publishing. But when she was promoting Foxtails 2, her book that came out in the winter, she loved doing TV spots and interviews so much. And she came off stage. I remember her first TV interview, and she said, "Mom, when can I do that again? That was amazing." And I'm thinking, all right, darling, we live in northern Michigan, so there aren't that many TV opportunities here. But let's discuss this. How can we make this something you can do more regularly? What did you love about it, right? Follow-up question. What did you love about it? And something she always says in her interviews, and what she responded was, it was amazing to see the power that I have through the work I do, through my writing. And I want to encourage as many other children as possible to feel that same way, to feel the impact of what their words and their actions can have in a positive way, so that they are empowered to do good in the world. And then for me as a neurologist and as a life coach, on my journey of creating my podcast, Talks with Dr. Shafer, and my work I do with people to help them reclaim their stories, I am so just thrilled by seeing her be so proactive and helping children come on her show, share their stories of how, and her show is What's Up Young Authors, come on her show, share their stories of how they wrote their books, promoted them, what they're wanting to do, how they are donating their time and funds to the charities they're interested in, what their goals are. Through doing this, she's empowering people to understand the power that they have, the choice that they have in life, so that hopefully there are fewer people in their generation in 10 or 20 years that need someone like me to kind of shake their reality and say, hey, you matter, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, I think I'm so impressed by her writing three books, nearly four books. It's amazing, at such a young age. And I think the fact that she was like, the homeschooling kind of probably instilled that in her, that kind of confidence in her to do that. And I think potentially it may have actually been stunted if she was at school, because they kind of say, right, well, you didn't write it in the right way, or, that wasn't really the assignment. We didn't really ask you to do that. I know that they do get to write books and literature at school, but it has to be done in a set way, or you have to have included something, and they don't allow for the creativity like you did, and you just sort of let her go with it, and you edited it, and you did all of the publishing for her. But then for her to go on and do her own kind of show essentially afterwards as well is a fantastic testament to her. And she's obviously a very, very talented child, and I think it's brilliant that she's done that. So yeah, well done.
I'm very proud, and I love where she's coming from with it, because for her it's really about empowering other people, and the books she writes are about wildlife and trying to create a relationship between readers and the true challenges that these animals are facing as they engage not only in the wild world, but also in the human world. And that's where they really come across some of the biggest challenges, the most dangerous encounters. And she really wants to impart that on people, the importance of saving wild spaces. And she's actually raising funds for a wildlife preserve to try to protect spaces in northern Michigan where animals like those characters in her books, foxes and wolves and other animals, can live in peace and not be, at risk of, human encroachment on their habitat. Absolutely giving her that power to her voice, just saying, yeah, you can write a book. Absolutely. I'm going to sit here. I'm going to give you my time. I'm going to give you my attention and foster this, look what happens when you just give them a little bit of time, how empowering that is. And homeschool is an excellent opportunity if your child is an artist, if your child is a ballerina, if your child is an equestrian, whatever it is that really just encourages them to embrace learning and living is going to empower them to live their best life no matter what challenges they face in the future, no matter what educational journey they want to go on. You're giving them the right start. So absolutely, homeschooling, home educating can be a wonderful opportunity to provide just that baseline so that they have the tools to move forward no matter what they choose in the future.
Thank you. That's lovely. I think that is a perfect ending to this chat. And thank you so much for coming on and giving your insight, Shafer. It's really appreciated. And I think it'll probably give a lot of parents out there the confidence to kind of realize that actually they can do this if they wanted to. And yeah, to kind of have a little bit of belief in themselves, but also a bit of belief in their children as well and their children's capabilities. So thank you very much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Lucy, for having me. It's been wonderful.
Thank you. And we will see you again next time for another episode of Stages for Ages. Thank you.